tried to share the greatest amount of information in the shortest amount of time and the greatest amount of simplicity, one might say. So now I will share a few books which I think can shed the greatest amount of light or give the greatest amount of information while being relatively accessible for people who are interested in reading books, with the use of this document, which summarizes simply, briefly, efficiently, hopefully a lot of information about how a society is structured. It's the totality. All the categories are interrelated, interconnected. It can be improved, of course, but it has helped me, and it helps me structure my views. That's a map, in a way, a cognitive map. And now I will share a few books briefly, which help understand and think more clearly. Okay, I will begin by sharing a few books which might be classified in household management, technology and communication, and the economy, one might say. So I will share a few books briefly. If I had to recommend one book which helps tremendously, that's How to Read a Book by Mortimer J. Adler and Charles Van Doren. It's a great introduction to philosophy, one might say, and it's a great help in reading and reading well, so that's a very useful, very important book. We live in a global village. I haven't read the book, but it's just to illustrate. We live in a global village. So the economy, of course, is interconnected, but the circulation of information as well. And scientific truths, they are universal, namely they are valid for all. So we all live in a gigantic village, and I try to find the best way of enabling the most harmonious relations between the members of the village. To become aware of this, that global consciousness is emerging step by step, it's important to understand the era and the times we live in. Here are books about the economy. In modern economies, there are a lot of bullshit jobs, useless jobs, which may be useful from the perspective of those who earn a living by practicing these jobs, but from the point of view of the whole of society, they are often detrimental, and recontextualized within the totality, a lot of jobs are useless, if not downright detrimental to the well-being of the individuals and society at large. Yeah. And in terms of household management, I do not necessarily recommend these specific books like the previous ones, but they can help. It's just to illustrate a certain mindset. I recommend How to Read a Book, but all the other books, it's just to illustrate. So here, a year of local eating, it might help and encourage people to change their diet and to re-localize production and consumption, at least for the goods and services which can be easily relocalized. And here, a book about prepping. It's the best, one of the best ways of being efficient at household management, to to plan forward, to anticipate, and to make supplies, etc. So these two books, they are illustrations of responsible household management and ecologically responsible diet and lifestyle. Yeah. Okay, so now I will share books which are very enlightening on the topics. First, the topics in green. So I will show some books which have taught me a lot or have enlightened me a lot, and which are sometimes demanding intellectually but accessible nonetheless. So this book is considered to be a reference, a scholarly reference. It's almost 30 years old, but it's important, still important nonetheless. So it can enlighten. Yeah. This book is really a scholarly work which is excellent. It's clear, accessible, while being very rigorous in a good sense and demanding. It's really an exceptional book about a very interesting, fascinating topic. Evolutionary psychology can be envisioned as sociobiology. Sometimes these are the same topics framed differently. This book is great as well, by Gerhard Meisenberg, The Natural History of Intelligence and Ethics in God's Image. It's very interesting. It's also about evolutionary psychology. So these books were about sociobiology, anthropology, and evolutionary psychology. Here are books about anthropology, modern books which are accessible, contain a lot of information, are controversial but in a good sense because they are thought-provoking in the good sense. Yeah, Human Diversity by Charles Murray. This book is really great. It's also relatively recent. A Troublesome Inheritance by Nicholas Wade. And a great book by Edward Dutton, Making Sense of Race. So yeah, it sheds a lot of light, the books that I've presented, onto the topics in green. I will show again. Yeah, so I have presented some, there are many other books, but some of the most enlightening modern books on the topics here: anthropology, sociobiology, demographics, psychology, physiognomy. Yeah, and now I will just show a few books about intelligence. Okay. This book, The Bell Curve, it has been, in my personal intellectual development, one of the most important books. It explains a lot. It connects intelligence and anthropology with sociology and economics. It sheds a lot of light, so it's very important. And another example, Richard Lynn wrote many important books. This is one of them. I could have picked another one. I have almost all of them. IQ and the Wealth of Nations. In a way, it's in the continuation of the bell curve. It explains, it connects IQ, intelligence, and economics on a global, in a global perspective. So I'm not saying that everything is true, because science is in a state of constant progress, improving the data, the methodology, the ideas, the conceptual frame. But it has been, it's more than 20 years old, but it has been important, and it can help think better, more clearly. Yeah. And now other books which are in a way in the transition between anthropology and sociology. This book is very important as well. It explains a lot about Western history, European anthropology, and the connection between anthropology, ideology, politics in a scholarly way. So it's very important and very enlightening. It explains from a sociobiological perspective the individualistic views and ideas of the West. Yeah. And here a book, it's there are a lot of data in this book by Steven Pinker, Enlightenment Now. It talks about sociology, economics, history, with a lot of interesting data. So it can help because it contains a lot of information. It's an important book. The interpretation, one can disagree or agree, but to know some of the data made available in this book is important. So it's an important, enlightening work. Yeah. Okay, so I have showed books about these topics and partly connected with these topics as well. Although the book by Mr. Steven Pinker is mostly a data about economics, history, etc. Now I will just show books which have been very important in my intellectual development and which are accessible while being demanding. Yeah. This book is truly great. It's accessible, it's short, it's demanding while being enlightening. It's a really a great book. Yeah. And it's cheap. Yeah. This book has been very important for me because here, in my particular case, I have grown in a socialist country, and when you when you have lived in the dark for most of your life, seeing the light makes it even more enlightening. So yeah, this book for people who have grown up with a socialist mindset, it's really great. It's not scholarly like the works of Mises and other economists, but it's intelligent. It contains important data and great explanation. So it's a great book. Yeah. And of course, this book and the Fed. So here it would be a book about finance, although it talks about economics, morality, law, the government, geopolitics as well, but it's really an exceptional book. It's enlightening, it explains well. Yeah, there are more scholarly theoretical works like there are on economics, but this book succeeds in being intelligible, enlightening, eyes-opening by an American hero, one might say a modern American hero. Yeah, so that's really a great book that I highly recommend. Not only for Americans, but for people who are interested in the economy and in finance at large, precisely because we live in a global village and the banking system is worldwide, one might say, directly or indirectly. So yeah, it's really an important work. And I will conclude by showing my documents again. So I've tried to condense the greatest amount of information, theoretical information, one might say. These are no data, but this is a conceptual frame which has helped me and might help others think more clearly. I'm not saying that it's very rigorous or that it's even correct. That's how I envision the world. It helps. I think it can be partly modified, it can be changed, completed, complexified, simplified maybe, but I don't think that simplifying would make it better. It can be greatly complexified, it can be rearranged, reordered, but it's for me, it contains the greatest amount of information, I mean the map of a human society in the greatest, in the shortest amount of space. So yeah. And in order to think intelligently, one has to be knowledgeable, at least in the fundamental determinations, in most or all topics. I could recommend books on all topics, but actually a good book, in a way, a really good book talks not just about, or sometimes they do, but the kind of books that I've presented, they talk about a specific topic, but they make connections with other topics. And yeah, I've shared largely enough references in this video or previously to connect the dots. My view, if I had to summarize, would be that in order to make any category intelligible, it has to be enlightened by all the others, obviously. Yeah. So yeah, thinking totally, in a way, in a good sense, means to connect the dots, to see the interconnectedness. So that's a map. It has helped me, and maybe it can help, and hopefully it can and will help others. As of now, yeah, as I record this, we are in early July 2023. This is the best I've been able to provide in terms of complexity, simplicity, accessibility, intelligibility, given the circumstances. Yeah, and now I will conclude with the other documents. This is the same, the best, the greatest amount of good pieces of advice in the shortest amount of space. We live in a confusing, difficult, moving time, so one way of finding stability and order and sovereignty on an individual and local level, one might say, these are good pieces of advice. Yeah, and now my other document. Things that you can quit and it will make your life healthier, richer, simpler, better. Yeah. Yeah. And I have personally given up on all these things. Some I have never been interested in, but I have given up on everything. I don't say that you have to necessarily. I don't want to sound like a fanatical Puritan, but in a very troubling time, sometimes simplifying and changing oneself for the better can only bring good aspects, like I said, in terms of sovereignty for the individuals and the communities to which they belong. Sovereignty, discipline, well-being in terms of mental health, one might say, and physical health. So yeah, these documents that I've been sharing, they are the best in terms of greatest amount of information and help in the shortest amount of time or space that I've been able to gather. And I have been practicing either the home economics aspect or the Puritanism aspect personally. I'm not saying that you have to give up on everything all at once if you are really if you have many addictions, but giving up on most or all of these things can only do you good in the long term, not to be dependent and the time and the money that you will save will enable you to to buy some of the good books that I've been recommending and to read them. So yeah, and here I end with a personal comment. I have struggled and failed. I have struggled personally. I have struggled and failed to communicate because my thoughts sometimes are too complex, probably for myself most of the time. So I have decided to simplify, and as long as I can, I will keep practicing all these good pieces of advice for myself, keep reading good books, and keep trying to lead the healthier lifestyle possible while sharing with others who are interested. There can be no liberty, individually or collectively, without discipline. And the more you impose discipline onto yourself as an individual, the less dependent you are on others, and the more mature you grow, the more free, in a good sense, you become, the more disciplined, the better you become. So I have offered the structure, the map, good pieces of advice. That's the formal aspect. It has to be filled with content, either in terms of will, morality, or intelligence and knowledge. I have been, as an individual, I have been practicing what I preach, what I say, on a personal level consistently. I can only encourage others to do it as well. Yeah. Yeah. And I will conclude with other documents.